What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the first ever members only Everyday Sens podcast. Technically, our second ever podcast, but this is the first ever members only podcast. And obviously, if you're here, you understand how it works. You submit questions through the Everyday Sens Instagram story. If you are a subscribed member to everydaysens.com, this is going to be our first run at this. And what we're going to try and do is just essentially answer as many questions as we can get to, maybe save some for another episode later on or something like that. But we have some juicy ones already to get into here, Brennan. So just why don't you maybe just explain a little bit just how we want this members only pod to kind of go forward with the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'd like to aim for like one episode a week. We're not going to be too strict on that, just kind of whenever we get time, and we'll try to get you guys some pods as much as possible. But I think it's another form of content for the members, right? It's something that I think we can connect a little more personally with them. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for you too much. We haven't talked about it too much, but I'd like to feature some members and have them in as guests and stuff. And we could do, I know some people responded to the question there when I submitted it with like, hey, can you have me on and stuff? So I know some people are down for it. But that's definitely something we can do. And I think there's a lot of potential with this as well. So it's exciting. Yeah.
It is, and obviously, the YouTube page and on Apple Music or on Spotify, it's free to subscribe or free to follow us on for those podcasts. But this one is going to be a special treatment, essentially, for members to submit some mock trades, some questions you want us to kind of answer. So, Brennan, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into it? What do we have first on the dock here?
Yeah, let's get into it. So I'm gonna start with something just a little more fun. It's not gonna be totally about the Sens, it's gonna be more about us. But it's from Alex Lawler Sucks on Instagram, and that's Alex. He's supported us for a while, so I'm supported Everyday Sens. How long has the podcast been in the works, and what drew you guys together? And I'll let you answer first, Jack.
Man, yeah, I guess it's been in the works for four months now. Like I think it was early January around then when I reached out to you just to see if you had plans at all to make a podcast because obviously I'd seen how the site had grown and how you're following on Instagram, even going through losing the account or whatever, and on Twitter as well had just skyrocketed because I remember following you on Instagram before I was even on Twitter, and then I went over to Twitter, kind of started, and then when I saw that you had joined over on Twitter, I was like, this is a great idea because he's gonna blow up, and honestly, so I noticed you hadn't had a podcast or anything, so I obviously had liked the podcast about the Sens and was just looking to see if you'd be interested in it, and yeah, you were right into it right away, and I guess I'll throw it to you there from your perspective.
Yeah, it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, for sure. I just never really know how to go about doing it and didn't really want to do it alone because it's a little harder to talk by yourself for 20, 30, 40 minutes. So when you reached out, it was kind of the perfect time. And it took us a while to get it going, of course, but this was kind of a good time anyway. It would be weird to launch it during the season, I think, like at the end of the season, right? So kind of can build here through the off season, get ready for next season and keep going. But yeah, I've seen a lot of your stuff too, obviously. Like I put on Instagram there in the caption, you're one of the better Twitter follows out there. You've done a lot of good stuff, and yeah, you did good stuff with Future Sickos too at the podcast. So yeah, it's, as you can see, Jack's the one hosting this primarily, so he's got the experience, right? You went through school and everything for related stuff. Yeah, I think we're gonna be a good combination. I think that first episode really hit it off. People were super supportive, and that was awesome to see. So hopefully we get the same here and build off of it.
Yeah, the support after the first episode and after the announcement and everything from everyone was overwhelming, and it was in the best way possible. It was awesome. It was more than I thought it would be, to be honest. Like I was excited about this for a long time, but I don't think it had really set in until we announced it and had that first episode. So really appreciate all the feedback about all that, and obviously makes it easier to keep going when you're getting positive feedback about stuff like that. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. I think the first episode was great, and man, we're literally. I would say these are more the dog days of the off season for teams that don't make the playoffs because you can't do anything. But we'll get obviously with the news that comes with the ownership and everything, it'll just ramp up. So we're really excited.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be too long either. It should be another month or so before we pretty much know who it's going to be. And if that's Ryan Reynolds, like it kind of shifts everything. There's gonna be so much to cover. Like even with Ottawa not having a lot of draft picks and stuff, whoever the ownership is, it's gonna be a lot to break down. 'Cause it's gonna be then the new arena. It's gonna be, are they gonna replace the coaching staff, the GM? Are they gonna revamp the front office? And these things kind of have to happen quickly, right? Because the season's gonna be coming. So I don't know about a timeline for any of that stuff, but it definitely is gonna have to be happening pretty quick. there's going to be a lot to break down. But yeah, for now, we'll just kind of create what we can create content wise and keep people interested.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. All right, that was a great question there from Alex Lawler. All right, Brandon, let's get to our next ones here.
Yeah, so second, I'll jump right in from at David Viscosi. It's if DJ Smith is fired, who replaces him?
All right, this is kind of a pick your poison, right? Because we are going to probably end up not enjoying this person very much by year two, three, let's say. I would, you kind of go around every coaching decision in the league and every coaching staff. Like I'm looking at the Bruins mentioned sometimes, and they're like, "What is Montgomery doing, putting this guy in the lineup?" And they're the best regular season team of all time. So it happens anyway. All that to say, I'm gonna go with a guy who has been linked to the Sens in the past. He's from Ottawa. I'm going with Claude Julien because he's been a scout for the St. Louis Blues, I think, for a while, and has been or is the Ottawa area scout for the Blues on the pro side. So he's been at a lot of Sens games, and especially when the Sens were struggling and DJ Smith's name was being thrown on the hot seat. I think Claude Julien was being spotted going to games, and people were like, "Oh, maybe he's going to be the coach." I believe his contract is up as a scout. I saw that floating around somewhere, so it kind of timeline wise works out. And I think, at face value, he would be kind of a perfect segue after DJ Smith. I think he's got a reputation of being a bit of a hard coach to play for in the sense that he holds you accountable. And his defensive numbers are really good. I don't have all the numbers in front of me. I just kind of wanted to go off the cuff here because he's stepped into Montreal. I'm thinking more about his second tenure in Montreal. He was he took that team to another step. He I believe they won the division under him in 2017. He's kind of that bridge, I think, between new school and old school, where he's not a new age coach. He would be a recycled NHL coach, but we need that, I think, in Ottawa, and that's kind of the base I'm going off of. So basically, whoever they hire, I hope it's a guy who has NHL experience, even though it's kind of going against the grain of what's happening in the NHL today. It's new age, new coaches, all that. Um, I think the Sens have had their fill of the new age new coach with DJ Smith a little bit. So Claude Julien's my guy. I just think defensively he would help this team grow and become a playoff caliber team.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking with the a lot of people they don't like recycled coaches. They want something new, bring new guys in, and it is good for the game to do that. But Ottawa already contributed in that facade, so I'm not looking for that again. I want a veteran, somebody who's won and knows how to get to the playoffs and kind of take the next step. Like going back to that point about newer coaches, I know there's another Toronto assistant. I think he like revamped their whole power play, and he's one of the hottest names on the market. Like if we bring in another Toronto assistant coach, man, just stop it. We're not doing that. Don't even mention it. I don't want it. So I've got a few here I can list off. I mean, I'll do it kind of quick, but I'll start with Andrew Brunette from the Devils. He's an assistant coach right now. So he was Florida's interim coach last year. They posted a record of 51, 18, and 6 and won a playoff series. And he was a nominee for the Jack Adams, which is for the coach of the year. And then they decided not to stick with them for whatever reason, and they hired Paul Maurice. Brunette's just been an assistant in New Jersey, so I think he got into some trouble with like a DUI off. I think something happened in the offseason, but I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into that. If that's a problem, then maybe
He
this isn't it. But
I believe he was driving a golf cart in
okay,
Florida at the All-Star game, and then he got pulled over. So it
okay,
wasn't a reckless kind of thing. It was just, yeah. So, but that would bring there would be questions about that, obviously, I think,
mm-hmm.
if he was a coach, but I think that's a great pick. He's been really good, especially in New Jersey this year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's I think he's pretty much who everybody wants. Like every other team around the league, I was kind of looking at some forums, and people really want Andrew Brunette. But with that too, for New Jersey, Lindy Ruff too. He's their head coach right now, and he said he wants to keep coaching. He's 63. I mean, he's an old guy, but um, he said he wants to keep coaching after this year. I don't know if they'll bring him back. They might just hire Brunette. Like they might just decide to go with Brunette instead. In which case, Ruff's on the market. Either way, one of them will be available. And I mean, I don't. Ottawa fans probably don't like Ruff a whole lot from his days in Buffalo, but I mean, like New Jersey is kind of on a similar timeline to Ottawa. I'd say they're about a year or two ahead. And last year they were a bad team, and they took the jump this year. Like they really made that next step. They're 2-2 in a first round series with a powerhouse in New York. So I mean, Ruff and Brunette both kind of proved they can take a team to the next level. So those are kind of my two candidates. And then, yeah, I had Claude Julien next as well.
Yeah, like these are all. I think Brunette's probably you might have talked me into him. And I know that when he took over in Florida last year, it was the interim head coach. I'm gonna just say, I don't know if it's completely true, but probably the first interim coach to ever win the President's Trophy, I would imagine, because interim tags are usually at the end of a season for a rebuilding team that hasn't been doing so well. So I would imagine that it was, and obviously the reason he took over for Joel Quenneville in Florida is because of the uh, Kyle Beach situation in Chicago that was brought up, which was way in the past, and obviously Joel Quenneville was part of that case. So the NHL suspended him. Now, and sorry, he I think where they were 6-0 at the time, maybe it was early in the season, and then Burnett took over and still led them to a President's Trophy in Florida. So that's nothing to scoff at. It's not like he took over at the end and kind of just tagged his name onto it. He's a very good coach. That I just brought up though another name that it's been circulating that he's back and hoping to get back into the NHL. I think there were a few reports that Bettman was considering it, and that is Joel Quenneville. Now, that would bring a lot of heat in Ottawa and a lot of questions because I don't even know how I feel. I don't even know if I would want that guy to be coaching the team. I know he's a great coach, but this thing that happened in Chicago can't be overlooked, especially for someone in a position of leadership like Joel Quenneville. So, if that's a name that's even in the conversation, what would your reaction be? I guess because that I'd be a little bit conflicted, and I'd want to hear from Quenneville himself about what's gone on in the last 2 years, like what's he done to help his image, I guess, a little bit, and help fix or help learn from that situation. But again, he's a hell of a coach and has the pedigree to show for it. And I think honestly, he would be a perfect fit for the Senators team. So that's just a name that I just thought of. Like, what would you think about that?
Yeah, he would be a really good fit as a coach. I would definitely want to hear from him as well. It would kind of come down to what he's done, his attitude about it all, and everything else. Um, it does come with that, you're going to get that criticism. Like, obviously, there's morals to it, but you're going to get that criticism, and you've got such a great culture there right now that there is some risk. Like, you don't want to do anything to screw that up. Um, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to like interview him, right? And kind of address that situation, see how he feels. And then it comes down to ownership if it comes to that to decide on, has he changed? Is this going to be better for the team? Um, yeah, I definitely think about Quenneville as a good option if he has changed and if he has done things to address it. Um, Otherwise, I mean, there's Mike Sullivan out of Pittsburgh. If he gets fired, I know there's been some talk he might get fired. They said they're going to leave it up to the new hockey operations person that comes in. So I mean, he's won a lot, obviously, in Pittsburgh. He's an interesting name. Then you've got like Bruce Boudreau. You've got Peter Laviolette. These are recycled guys, but I mean, again, like I said, I want a veteran coach. Like Laviolette, I know he's not a guy that plays the youth a whole lot, but he's coached 5 teams and made it to 3 cup finals and won a cup. So that's somebody who you can kind of look at, and he's a fiery guy too.
I've got a okay. So with those 4 names you kind of just named, let's do a little bracket. So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go Claude Julien against Bruce Boudreau, just 2 guys who weren't in the league this year. Like essentially, Boudreau was, but you know what I mean. We'll go those 2 against each other, and then we'll do Laviolette versus Sullivan. So in the first one, Julien and Boudreau, who are you taking?
I would take Julian. Yeah, I like
Okay,
Julian.
and
Yeah.
then Sullivan or Laviolette.
Sullivan,
All right,
if
and then
he's available. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, asterisk on Sullivan for
yeah.
sure, and then Sullivan or Claude Julien.
Ooh.
See, I think that's tough. I like Sullivan a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
just it would be he's probably gonna be a hotter commodity, I would say, than Claude Julien. So you do have to factor that in. But with the new ownership, this asterisk of Ottawa not being a preferred destination and having to throw more money at them might go out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely true. He probably would be more expensive still than Julian would be. I mean, not that that should kind of decide it for us at this point, but um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would take whoever would come here out of those two because I mean, Sullivan, like he's proven, right? I mean, Pittsburgh's been a dynasty. Like they've had a good team, of course. Like it's not just Sullivan, but um, like you go from coaching Sidney Crosby and Malkin and all these stars, and you bring him in. He's able to coach Tim Stützle and Brady Kachuk and these young stars, right? I mean, I think he could do a great job. I think he's one of the better coaches out there. Julian too. I mean, yeah, he hasn't coached in a bit, but that cup he had with Boston was just incredible. What they did, that team, and Julian too. I mean, I know he's living in Ottawa. He was at a ton of Sens games this year as a scout, obviously, but I don't know. I mean, he's probably catching the action as well, right? So,
Yeah.
I think those two definitely, along with Brunette, would be my top 3. Thinking about it
Okay.
more, but again, Sullivan, you don't know if he's available, so um, yeah, and then other than that, like there's not a whole lot for recycled coaches. Like Dallas Aikens got fired, but I'm not interested in him really.
No. No.
But yeah,
I think there are going to be a lot of names. and it's tough right now because the first round's not over, you know? So, like, if the first round once the first round ends, I think a few might get fired.
Yeah, I heard.
Um,
I was reading about Gerard Gallant could be on the line if they don't get past the first round in New York too.
See,
It's,
like,
uh, it's
that's a
expensive
guy
though.
who yeah, I mean, he's one of the better ones, but that's also a guy who has had very, very short stints in everywhere he's been, and it's
True.
starting to like, it's this isn't just, a coincidence, I don't think anymore, right? Because he was in Florida, then he went to Vegas, I believe. He was the expansion coach in Vegas,
Yep.
and then he went to New York. So, like, a lot of movement here for Gerard Gallant in this 6-year playoff drought that Ottawa's had. But again, that's what the Sens need. They just need a guy to get them into the playoffs, and then we'll go from there. So I would not hate that name as well. Um, yeah, it's a great question. That's a good one. So let's move on to our third one here.
Yeah. All right. I will go with at not Vitez. If you're GM, what are you doing with Søgaard next year? AHL starter or NHL backup?
It's tough. That's a tough one because I I do think that Sogard can battle for that backup position, and sometimes like I'm looking at the New York Islanders, and obviously Ilya Sorokin's a lot older than Sogard is right now, but I believe it was 2 years ago, maybe even last season, that Sorokin was a tandem with Varlamov. And then he just took over the starting job, and that's how you kind of get a goalie ready to be an NHL starter. So my point, I guess, is I don't know if a full season in the AHL is gonna be good for Sogard, because what if he goes down there and struggles again? Then what? Then what do you do? But then you raise the question of, okay, are you gonna run Forsberg and Sogard as your tandem, and are you confident in that? So, I think it all just depends how he comes into camp, and I know that's kind of like a non-answer because we don't know, and that's an obvious kind of answer too, but I do think it matters because if he comes in and actually plays himself into a backup role or even a half starting role, then you have to honor it. He's part of the system. You can't be sheltering these young goalies anymore. It's the best player plays, and I know they always say that with it, but it's been tongue in cheek for the last little while because development has taken a precedence. But now I believe that if Sogard is your best option in net going into training camp, even if it's not a great option, depending what you can do this summer, I think he absolutely has to be considered for your NHL roster. Just I really like the way he finished the year. He went through a lot of ups and downs, but he finished on an up, I believe. So I don't hate Solgard pushing for an AHL spot next year. I think it would be kind of unfortunate for his development to just stick him in the AHL. If he ends up there, that's fine. But just to start him there, I don't think would be fair.
Yeah, it's a hard one for me. So, admittedly, right now I'm writing an article on available goaltenders, and it's not so like I've been in Sogard's corner all year. Like I've been backing this guy a lot. People forget he won Rookie of the Month in February, so he did have his good moments. It's just the risk, right? Like Forsberg's coming off of 2 MCL tears. Like, can he even stay healthy next year? That's one question. Because if he gets hurt, now you've got Sogard, who's relatively unproven, and then what, you're calling up Kevin Mandolese again, and now we're back where we were last year. So you're really banking on Sogard taking another step if he's going to be in the NHL. And I like him. I definitely see him as a future option and potentially the starter. Um, but like I said, yeah, when this gets published, I'll probably have the article up too. And that kind of leads us into our next question as well, which is from at Navitez as well. It's if he is in the AHL, which goaltender would you look to target on the market?
I just mentioned him. I think Semyon Varlamov, I think, has served a backup role this season because Sorokin was so good. So, but I think he's still got some starts left in him. He played for obviously a good defensive team in New York. But that's the guy because I think price range he'd be good. He's a bit older, but younger, I guess, than Cam Talbot was. Maybe I don't know if they're around the same age, but I would be more inclined to go with a guy like that and have a Forsberg, Varlamov, and then maybe a Sogard. And just another thing on the Sogard thing is you don't want to have a situation where he's up and down all year. Like I want him sticking in one spot pretty much for the whole season. So if he's gonna be and obviously injuries come in the way of that, but like I'm looking at all these young goalies like Jesper Wallstead and Askarov over in Nashville. Like these guys are studs and they're going to be studs, but they just spent the entire season in the AHL. That's what the Sens need to do with their young goalies. That's where Maryland should be all season next year. So stuff like that I think matters, and I think getting a guy like Varlamov, if Søgaard is in fact going to be an AHL goalie, that's good because it gives you that that stability where you have two starters no matter what. And I guess injuries, it's tough because you can't it's really hard to uh gauge, I guess, who's going to get injured when. And like maybe Forsberg will be healthy forever now. Like the bad luck happened, I guess, right? And knock on wood, but yeah. So long story or long answer short, Semyon Varlamov is my pick. He'll be on the UFA market.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm writing on it, and he's actually my pick as well. Number one pick. I looked up, like, he's got excellent stats. I mean, I think it was Sorokin took over last year and was really good, but Varlamov, I don't think he's been below .910 for a save percentage in the last like 4 years. He's been excellent. I think he was in the top 25% for high danger save percentage, which is where Ottawa's goaltenders were god awful. Um, I don't know. He does a lot of good things. Like you said, I don't know if you want him as a 1A starter because I think he's 34 right now, turning 35. So it's kind of a risky thing there. But I think, yeah, if you pair him with Forsberg, that's a pretty good tandem. Again, Søgaard could be ready. It's just the risk because Ottawa has to get better next year. They have to. They cannot sit there and miss the playoffs again. You got to take over. And if Sogaard's not ready and you enter the season with him as your only real backup option, like you're kind of strapped, right? And now you got to play Forsberg for a stupid amount of games again, like they did at the start of this
Yeah.
year.
So another thing on that though is like, okay, so let's say you're Mads Søgaard, right? And you're a guy who wants obviously to play in the NHL and obviously incentive wise as soon as possible because they get way more money when they're playing in the NHL. So if you're him and you're sitting in, you're reflecting on your season, you're going into your exit meetings with Dorion and DJ. I don't know if he'd be, you know, upset, I guess, or being like, yeah, this was good for my development. You know what I'm saying? Because athletes are athletes. They want to win. They want to compete. They don't care about my 10-year plan when you're the goalie for the Ottawa Senators and you're in the midst of a playoff run and you're the starter every night. Like that'll weigh on you. And what the reason I like Solgaard so much is because of the way he bounced back after that brutal stretch on that road trip, right? He was letting in 5 goals a game for like 4 or 3 straight games. It was crazy. And it was the first couple of games, you're like, the team's not playing well. It's not his fault, but they didn't get a save. They didn't get a save when they needed it from him, the high danger or not. So the way he bounced back and kind of, I think he had a stretch that Boston game where he was really solid, even though they didn't get the wins. I think stuff like that proves that Sogard has the mental capability to be ready next season. So my point about all that is just that I think like if you're the team being like, we need to make playoffs this year, and you tell Solgaard that being like, this is a challenge if you want this, I am confident that a player will come in challenging for a spot because they want to win and not being like, yeah, I need to go develop in Belleville. If that makes sense, especially for a goalie, you don't want to. If you go down to Belleville, who's probably going to have depleted resources because a lot of them are going to make the Sens next year, maybe you're not going to get that winning confidence anymore. This isn't a situation where going down to Belleville is going to be good for a player's confidence because they aren't necessarily in a better situation than the Big Sens. So, but I do agree that Sogard, it's hard to kind of put that all on his shoulders. Um, but at the same time, it's going to happen at some point. So I don't mind if he's ready. It's just, I guess it's subjective being saying is he ready or not, right? It's up to the team and whoever's in charge.
Yeah, you're right. It's just for me, it's just the risk, but I would feel confident with Sogar going in, to be honest with you. And the important thing about that is he's on his ELC still, so you're saving the money, right? Like Varlamov's probably going to cost you. I mean, he's not going to be crazy money, but I mean, there's going to be teams wanting him. I would assume like I said, he's been a really good goalie, even though Sorokin took over. Like, there's no saying Varlamov should be a backup goaltender. Like, he actually did very well as a starter 2-3 years ago. I think he finished fifth in Vesna voting like 3 years ago in that COVID year. So it's not that long ago, right? So, um, if you're gonna pay a guy like that, you're probably gonna pay him maybe what, a 2 year deal at like 4 million. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but somewhere in that vicinity. Whereas Sogard's under 1 million right now. So if you can upgrade your depth, right? Like you could use that money to upgrade the third line or upgrade your fourth
Yeah.
line. So it is important, but yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with your point. I'd be down to go with Sogard. I really do believe in him. I think he showed a lot of good things last year. He was definitely put in an unfair situation too. That has to be noted. I mean, that was just absurd what he kind of had to deal with there. Um, but yeah, do you have anything else to add on that one?
Just I guess if they go out and sign this Varlamov or anyone, any other free agent veteran goalie, kind of. kind of in the same vein as Cam Talbot, like a short term, whatever. What if you come to camp then and Sogard greatly outperforms both Forsberg and this new goalie, right? Like this is also a possibility that they have to prepare for. So I don't know. Like it's really tough. Maybe like I don't know how many moving parts there's going to be in the goal in the crease because I know it was crazy last year for all the teams that needed new goalies and everything. But if that's the case again this year, maybe if the Sens just sit back and wait for like a guy who kind of slips through everyone's fingers and gets them on a maybe even a PTO as a goalie because then you eliminate long term risk with the cap stuff. Because I would be sure in Varlamov, but I'd be worried then that what happens if Varlamov and Sogard outplay Forsberg in camp, right? Then it's just and again I think I might be putting too much emphasis on camp. Usually when you go in, you've got your two goalies in mind, but I don't know if that's going to be the case for the Sens depending on who they bring in. So that's just kind of where I'm at with the whole goaltending situation. And again, it's hard when 16 teams haven't finished their season yet. So there's plenty of teams right now that are going to be looking to move pieces in the crease. Like Toronto's not going to have any answer in that after this season because Samsonov is probably playing his way out of there. So yeah, we'll see. I got a lot of this is a conversation that I think we can have in July, and it might not change. It might change completely. So yeah, that's just my final thoughts on a very complicated situation for the goalies.
Yeah, for sure. So we will move on and probably talk about that again. That was a good conversation though. So I'll move to everybody's favorite topic in Alex DeBrincat. I know people are getting sick of hearing about Alex DeBrincat, but we're not just gonna talk like should he stay or should he go. Um, I'm gonna actually use that not Vitez again. He submitted a bunch of questions, which is good. We want as many questions as we can get. So if Detroit, who obviously DeBrincat's a Michigan native, right, and I think he said he grew up cheering for Detroit. If Detroit wanted DeBrincat in a trade, and there have been rumblings of this, what would you want as a package in return? If you enjoyed the first half of this podcast, you can listen to the second half with a subscription to everydaysens.com. You'll gain access to a private link in which you can watch on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcasts. Your subscription not only grants access to additional podcasts, articles, wallpapers, and more, but it supports Everyday Sens in covering the team. Jack and I put countless hours into producing quality, unique content for fans of the Senators, and it just wouldn't be feasible without your support. So not only for the premium content, but also for the free content, we really do appreciate every single one of our subscribers. If you've been considering it, we highly recommend it, and that's where you're going to be able to watch the second half of this episode and every other members-only podcast. So thank you for listening, and go subscribe.